Good day, dear students. The theme of our lecture today is Modern Text Analysis and Ancient Rhetoric. Lecture number 2. Questions we discussed today are the origins of modern text analysis and the content of ancient rhetoric. Modern textual linguistic theorists agree that the first attempts at a scientific approach to text analysis were undertaken by ancient rhetoricians. That is why acquaintance with the history and ideas of classical rhetoric allows us to trace the origins of many of the current achievements of text linguistics. In modern linguistics, rhetoric is interpreted as a philological discipline that studies the methods of constructing artistic expressive speech, primarily prosaic and oral. Rhetoric is a scientific discipline that studies the patterns of generation, transmission, and perception of good speech and high-quality text. In human everyday life, rhetoric means, firstly, the theory and art of eloquence, and secondly, beautiful speech, but speech without content. We are of particular interest in those aspects of classical rhetoric that have received subsequent scientific understanding in modern text analysis. In science, sophists are recognized as the founders of rhetoric. So-called rhetoricians paid teachers who not only taught eloquence, but also composed speeches for the needs of citizens. The sophists saw their task in teaching citizens to speak well and convincingly about political and moral issues, while the most important thing for the orator was not the achievement of truth, but persuasion. According to one of the most famous sophists, Gorgias, only a skillfully composed speech can convince, and it does not matter at all whether it corresponds to the truth or not. In the time of Gorgias, rhetoric was recognized as the queen of all sciences, and teaching eloquence was the highest degree of ancient education. There are several stages in the history of rhetoric during which a different approach to understanding the very subject of rhetoric is noticeable. The first stage is associated with the beginning of Greek civilization. The rhetoric of this period is based on the concept of persuasion. Aristotle defines rhetoric as the art of finding possible ways to persuading about any subject. The second stage is more typical for the Roman civilization. During this period, the concept of persuasion is re-evaluated as the main goal of the speaker. The famous Roman rhetorician Quintilian, the author of Rhetorical Instruction in 12 books, polemicizing with Aristotle, offers different definitions of rhetoric. So, rhetoric is the art of speaking well. The third stage in the development of rhetoric, which began in the Middle Ages and the beginning of Renaissance, is characterized by an even greater departure from the original content. This period is characterized by the interpretation of rhetoric as the art of decorating speech. The direct subject of rhetoric is predominantly written text. This understanding has survived to this day and is reflected in the dictionary definitions of many reference books. For example, the definition of rhetoric in the Dictionary of Foreign Words. Currently, a new stage in the development of rhetoric as a philological discipline is observed. The emergence of a new type of rhetoric, it is sometimes called neo-rhetoric or neo-rhetorical theory of argumentation, or simply the theory of argumentation, is primarily associated with the works of Perelman, who in the 50s, 60s turned to the study of the logic of value judgments in jurisprudence. He decided to return rhetoric to its original meaning, to be the art of persuasion. Thus, they discovered rhetoric as the logic of informal judgment. The new rhetoric, which is based on the Aristotelian canon, should, according to Perelman, study the rules of argumentation in all types of statements for any type of audience in order to convince the latter to take the side of the speaker. In its most general form, rhetoric can be defined as the art primarily by word to convince the interlocutor that you are right. In other words, it is the art of influencing the thoughts, knowledge, attitude, and actions of the interlocutor in a certain way. In this ancient rhetoric, and with the theory of argumentation, requires modern linguistic pragmatics, which assigns a target setting, the speaker's intention, and a fundamental role in explaining the mechanism of language functioning, as well as a theory of speech acts, which is engaged in creating a universal classification of speech actions. According to the ancient canon, rhetoric includes 5 parts corresponding to the 5 necessary stages of the orator's work on the speech. Finding a topic. The second, the location of the material. Third, verbal expression, memorization, and then pronunciation. In other words, the classic pattern of rhetoric is as follows. Find something to say, arrange what was found in order, give it a verbal form, to confirm all this in memory, and pronounce. Thus, the rhetorical process covers the entire part from the speaker's intention to the sounding words. According to the ancient canon, speech is divided into 6 parts: introduction, proposal, narration, confirmation, refutation, and conclusion. For less significant topics, this position can be limited to 3 main parts: introduction, confirmation, and conclusion. It is easy to see that most modern socio-political and scientific texts contain only the 3 parts mentioned above. Ancient authors paid attention to many features of speech, which in modern science are the subject of special study. Let us recall, for example, the well-known in psychology law of the first and last place, according to which the information located at the beginning and in the end of the message is better remembered. This law is an excellent agreement with the ancient rule of the arrangement of arguments in speech, when the so-called Homeric order is recognized as the best. By placing the most important elements of proof at the beginning and in the end of a speech, ancient authors achieved the highest persuasiveness in their speeches. The final stage of elocution is teaching about style and genres of speech. According to Aristotle, it is not enough to know what to say, but you also need to know how to speak. According to Aristotle, written speeches are influenced more by their style than by their content. The main merit of style is its clarity, because only clear speech achieves its goal. In addition, the style should correspond to the subject of speech. Aristotle spoke about the different impressions given to the audience by written and oral text. That is, he touched upon issues that to this day are the subject of the most heated discussions in science. He explained why the speeches of the written style seem dry, and the speeches of the orators, even those delivered with success, are tedious when they are picked up for reading. Thus, the triad invention, disposition, and location turns out to be an interconnected rhetorical scheme covering the preparation and the process of text formation itself. Each of these parts makes sense only as an integral part of a single speech-making process, from the inception of the author's intention to its implementation in speech. Another important part of the speech-making process is memorization, a set of mnemonic techniques used to facilitate memorization of the text. Many ancient authors achieved fame, among other things, also due to their amazing ability to memorize. Quintilian mentions, for example, the Roman Hartesia, who once, after the end of the auction, which lasted a whole day, was able to list without errors and in the correct sequence all the items put up for sale, their prices and buyers. In ancient Greek, a water clock was an obligatory attribute of any court session. The speaker's speech ended with the last drop of water in the clock. The clock put the speaker in a tight time frame, forcing him to plan in advance the content and delivery of his speech. In delivering a speech, speakers focus on voice, facial expressions, and gesture. Aristotle names three factors that determine the art of mastering the voice. It is mainly about the use of voice in the art of speech, how it should be used to express a particular passion, for example, when to speak loud, when soft, when medium, and how to choose intonation. For there are three things that pay attention to: strength, harmony, and rhythm. In ancient rhetoric, an important place was given to facial expressions and gestures. The study of the rules of using facial expressions and gestures according to the Demosthenes methods was to be accompanied by a set of exercises in front of a mirror. The artist believed that the gestures should accompany the thought and voice step by step, not overtaking them or lingering in front of them. In their opinion, gestures should have a certain connection with each other. A significant stage in the development of rhetorical science in Russia was the teaching of Lomonosov. The textbook on rhetoric by Mikhail Lomonosov was published in 1748 under the title A Brief Guide to Eloquence, Book 1, in which it contains rhetoric, shows the general rules of eloquence. However, this was already the second version of the textbook, and the first version of the rhetoric, entitled A Brief Guide to the Benefit of Lovers of Sweet Speech, was written in 1744 and remained in the manuscripts. A Short Guide to Eloquence by Lomonosov was reprinted 3 times only during the life of the scientist. The ideas of Lomonosov for many years determined the development of rhetoric as a science in Russia. According to experts, all subsequent Russian rhetoric was based on the work of this great thinker. Currently, there is a significant increase in scientific interest in rhetorical heritage all over the world. Many provisions of ancient and later rhetoric are reflected in the works of modern authors who develop topical issues of text construction. The modern direction of rhetoric is called neo-rhetoric or neo-rhetorical theory of argumentation. In Kazakh society, regardless of who ruled it and what ulus or jus it was in, as a Reshivness noted, As the researchers noted, the kingdom of the word and the kingdom of law reigned. Eloquence based on a rich vocabulary was the most common mass phenomenon in Kazakh society and was considered the property of a nomad. It was both a common communication tool and a means of protecting interest at different levels, from intra-tribal to intercultural relations. The most important standards of life and the state, government orders and acts were represented in a concise and impressive form that is easy to remember. A special, in many respects, unique place in the general history of judicial oratory belongs to the oral eloquence of bees of Kazakhstan in the 17th and 19th centuries. Judicial functions in Kazakhstan during this period were carried out by Khans, sultans, and beys. Moreover, the beys were not only mediating judges in resolving litigations, experts in Adat and Sharia, but also very often acted as politicians, diplomats, and military leaders. The great steppe keeps in the historical memory the names of many beys who became famous at different times of judges and tribunes for their victories and exploits in adversarial, judicial, and political processes, and in the arena of protecting the interest of the clan and fatherland. A whole epoch is associated with the names of three outstanding beys, Toli B, Kazabek B, and Atike B. They were all Kazakh state and judicial figures and authorities. The distinctive feature of the bees oratory should be called not only the oral form of the court, which implies speech improvisation, but also the philosophical and allegorical nature of the bees' judicial speeches, which had a short and poetic form due to the Eastern tradition of verbal art. Answer the question, please. Name the origins of modern text analysis. How is rhetoric interpreted in modern linguistics? And what did the sophists see in their task? Thank you for your attention.